Imagine a city floating on a lake, a shimmering metropolis of white stone, towering pyramids, and lush hanging gardens, connected to the mainland by massive stone bridges. At its peak, this city was larger than London, Madrid, or Rome. This was Tenochtitlan, the heart of the Aztec Empire. But the most incredible part of the story isn't just how beautiful the city was, it's where it came from. The Aztecs weren't always powerful. In fact, they started as a group of wandering refugees that nobody wanted. How did a homeless tribe, seen as barbarians by their neighbors, transform into the most feared superpower in the Western Hemisphere in just a few centuries? This is the story of the Aztec Empire, a tale of prophecy, engineering genius, and a fierce will to survive. The prophecy. From outcasts to architects. Our story begins in the 13th century, a time of great migration across the Mesoamerican landscape. A group of people calling themselves the Mexica, the namesake of modern-day Mexico, were wandering through the Central Highlands as displaced nomads. According to their sacred oral traditions, they had departed from their mythical ancestral homeland of Aztlan under the guidance of their patron deity, Huitzilopochtli. This god of war and the sun didn't just promise them a home, he promised them an empire, provided they could find a very specific divine omen. But finding this sign was no easy feat. The Mexica weren't searching for fertile plains or defensible mountain passes. They were looking for a site that seemed mathematically impossible. An eagle perched atop a prickly pear cactus, triumphantly clutching a writhing snake in its beak. For nearly a century, they wandered as barbarian outcasts, often marginalized or violently driven away by established city-states like the Tepanecs, who viewed the Mexica as uncivilized interlopers. Finally, in the year 1325, the wandering ended. On a small, desolate, and swampy island in the middle of Lake Texcoco, the prophecy manifested exactly as Huitzilopochtli had foretold. There was the eagle, there was the snake. However, the promised land was a logistical nightmare, a marshy mess infested with insects and poisonous serpents. While any other tribe would have viewed the island as uninhabitable, the Mexica saw it as a divine mandate to prove their worth. They realized that if the earth wouldn't support their ambition, they would have to re-engineer the world itself. How do you build a massive stone city on top of a lake without it sinking into the mud? Engineering a miracle. The floating gardens. The Aztecs were perhaps the greatest civil engineers of the ancient world, transforming a swampy wasteland into a high-tech metropolis. Since they lacked sufficient dry land for traditional agriculture, they invented a revolutionary system called chinampas. These were not merely gardens. They were an engineering marvel. The Aztecs wove giant rectangular baskets out of sturdy reeds, filled them with layers of decaying vegetation and rich, nutrient-dense mud dredged from the bottom of Lake Texcoco. They then anchored these plots to the lake bed by planting willow trees, known as huejotes, at the corners. The deep roots of these trees acted as living anchors, preventing the man-made islands from drifting. These floating gardens functioned as the world's first high-intensity hydroponic farms. Because the plants had constant access to water and the soil was perpetually enriched by lake minerals, the chinampas were incredibly fertile. They could produce up to 7 harvests a year, whereas mainland farmers struggled to produce 2. This massive food surplus was the high-octane fuel that allowed the Aztec population to explode, turning a small tribe into a massive urban workforce. With their food supply secured, the Aztecs turned their genius toward urban infrastructure. They constructed 3 massive causeways, elevated stone highways, that spanned miles across the lake to connect the island to the mainland. These roads featured removable bridges to defend the city from naval attacks. To ensure public health, they built sophisticated dual-pipe aqueducts that brought fresh spring water from the hills of Chapultepec, providing every citizen with clean water and public baths. They even engineered a 10-mile-long levee, the Albaradón de Nezahualcóyotl, to protect the city from floods and separate the fresh lake water from the brackish, salty sections. Tenochtitlan became a masterpiece of urban planning, centered on the sacred precinct and the towering Templo Mayor. But as the city grew into a shimmering white marvel of stone and steam, so did the Aztecs' hunger for power. If they could conquer the very water they lived on, what was to stop them from conquering every tribe they could see? The Triple Alliance, a superpower, is born. In 1428, the Mexica made a strategic move that fundamentally altered the course of Mesoamerican history. Tired of being subordinate to the Tepanec Empire, they formed the Triple Alliance with the city-states of Texcoco and Tlacopan. This military pact was not merely a defensive agreement, it was a launchpad for total regional dominance. Together, they executed a lightning campaign that overthrew the powers that had bullied them for decades. Once the dust settled, the Mexica emerged as the dominant partner, transforming their humble island settlement into the nerve center of a vast, unstoppable superpower. The Aztecs built a society where the gears of government and religion were greased by the machinery of war. Every Aztec boy, regardless of his birthright, was conscripted into military training from a young age. In their state-run schools, the Telpochcali, they mastered the Macuahuitl, a terrifying wooden broadsword embedded with obsidian blades so razor-sharp they were reputed to decapitate a horse in a single strike. However, for an Aztec warrior, the ultimate prestige did not come from the body count on the field. It came from the number of live captives they secured. But why risk their lives to capture rather than kill? The answer lies in their visceral theology. The Aztecs believed the universe was locked in a precarious cycle of birth and destruction. To them, the sun was a warrior god in a constant, exhausting battle against the forces of darkness. To ensure the sun rose each morning and the world remained in balance, the gods required precious water, human blood. This wasn't perceived as cruelty, but as a heavy, sacred duty to prevent the literal end of the universe. While this vision of survival through sacrifice seems terrifying to us, it provided the Aztecs with a powerful, unified purpose. But as their empire expanded and their tribute demands grew, was it their fearsome warriors or their sophisticated daily life that truly made them the masters of Mexico? The imperial economy, tribute and trade. Beyond the glint of obsidian blades and the grandeur of floating temples, the Aztec Empire functioned as a massive, finely tuned economic machine. To keep Tenochtitlan running, the Mexica relied on a system of tribute that flowed in from every corner of their territory. Conquered city-states weren't just subjects, they were the city's lifelines. Every few months, long caravans arrived at the city gates, carrying tons of maize, beans, and cocoa. But it wasn't just food. The nobility demanded the best of the best. They received shimmering tropical feathers, jaguar pelts, fine cotton clothes, and precious green jade. This constant flow of wealth allowed the Aztecs to build their massive pyramids and support a whole class of artists, priests, and thinkers who didn't have to spend their days farming. However, the economy wasn't only built on taxes, it was also driven by the energy of the free market. The Pochteca were a special group of long-distance merchants who acted as the empire's economic explorers. These brave traders traveled far beyond the protected borders, moving between the high mountains and the steamy coasts to bring back luxury items like turquoise and chocolate. Interestingly, they often doubled as elite spies for the emperor, gathering secret info on the wealth and defenses of other lands. In the great markets, everything was organized with perfect precision. If you were an Aztec citizen, you were part of a massive trade network that linked the whole region together. This combination of organized tribute and daring trade turned a swampy island into the wealthiest spot in the world. But as the piles of gold and feathers grew higher, did the Aztecs realize they were creating a target that outsiders simply couldn't ignore? Call to action. The rise of the Aztecs is one of the most intense chapters in human history. If you want to dive deeper into the mysteries of lost civilizations and the secrets of ancient engineering, make sure to hit that subscribe button right now. We have much more to explore together. Life in the empire, chocolate, markets, and poetry. While their warriors were expanding the borders, life inside Tenochtitlan was surprisingly sophisticated, governed by a complex social structure and a highly organized economy. At the heart of this commercial world was the marketplace of Tlatelolco, a site so vast that Spanish chroniclers estimated 60,000 people traded there daily. This wasn't just a local bazaar. It was a regulated hub where government officials, known as Pocteca, monitored transactions to ensure fairness. Traders offered everything from jaguar skins and gold jewelry to exotic quetzal feathers. Most uniquely, the Aztecs utilized a currency system based on cacao beans and cuautli, which are standardized lengths of cotton cloth. Imagine the economic power of a society where your morning drink was literally made from liquid gold. Education was another cornerstone of Aztec sophistication. Long before Europe implemented similar systems, the Aztecs established mandatory public education for all children, regardless of gender or social rank. Boys attended either the Telpochcali for military and trade training or the Calmecac, an elite school for future priests and leaders. Here, they mastered Nahuatl, a poetic and highly descriptive language, and studied the Tonalpohualli, a 260-day sacred calendar, alongside a 365-day solar cycle that was more astronomically precise than the contemporary Julian calendar. They were a people of fascinating contradictions, capable of visceral violence on the battlefield, yet deeply devoted to the aesthetics of music and floral poetry. This cultural richness extended to their leisure. They obsessed over ulama, a ritualistic ball game played on an eye-shaped court where athletes kept a 9-pound rubber ball in motion using only their hips. But as this complex society thrived in its isolated island paradise, they remained blissfully unaware of the metal-clad strangers already sailing toward their shores. How could a civilization that mapped the stars so perfectly fail to see the approaching storm that would end their world? The arrival of the gods, the end of an era. By the early 16th century, the Aztec Empire had reached its absolute zenith under the rule of Moctezuma II. From the central hub of Tenochtitlan, the Mexica oversaw a sophisticated tributary network encompassing over 500 city-states and roughly 6 million subjects. Their dominance was absolute, yet the empire's internal stability was brittle, held together by fear and heavy taxation. In 1519, this isolated world was shattered when floating mountains appeared off the Gulf Coast. These were the Spanish galleons, carrying Hernán Cortés and roughly 500 conquistadors, men who wore shimmering metal clothes, possessed fire sticks that could shatter stone, and rode massive, terrifying beasts known as horses, which the Aztecs had never seen. For Moctezuma, the arrival was a profound theological crisis. Aztec cosmology and the sacred calendar, the Tonalpohualli, suggested the impending return of Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent god, who had allegedly sailed east centuries earlier. Were these pale-skinned strangers divine messengers or merely mortal invaders? This hesitation proved to be a catastrophic strategic error. While Moctezuma sent gifts of gold to appease the newcomers, he inadvertently fueled their greed. Cortés, a master of psychological warfare and political manipulation, quickly identified the empire's Achilles heel. He realized that the Tlaxcalans and other local tribes were desperate to throw off the Aztec yoke. By forging alliances with these disgruntled locals, Cortés transformed his small band of soldiers into a massive insurgent army. As they marched toward the heart of Mexico, they left a trail of diplomatic intrigue and brutal massacres in their wake, systematically dismantling the myth of Aztec invincibility. Moctezuma watched from his palace, paralyzed by the choice between total war and sacred hospitality. The stage was now set for one of history's most dramatic confrontations. But as the two armies finally stood face to face, Could a city built on water survive a siege from both land and an invisible, microscopic enemy? The fall of the Lake City. The historic encounter on November 8, 1519, between Moctezuma II and Hernán Cortés on the causeway leading into Tenochtitlan represented a collision of two entirely different realities. Moctezuma, the Huey Tlatoani, greeted the Spaniards with immense ritual, believing they might be envoys of the god Quetzalcoatl. Conversely, the Spaniards were stunned by the sheer scale of the Aztec capital. Built in the middle of Lake Texcoco, the city featured sophisticated grid planning, massive temples, and a population of nearly 200,000, larger than any European city at the time. Bernal Díaz del Castillo, a soldier under Cortés, famously wrote that it seemed like an enchanted vision from a fantasy novel. However, the diplomatic veneer quickly shattered. Driven by a thirst for gold and the requerimiento, a document used to justify Spanish sovereignty, Cortés seized Moctezuma within his own palace. The atmosphere turned lethal during the massacre in the Great Temple, leading to the Noche Triste, or Night of Sorrows, where the Spanish were temporarily driven out with heavy losses. Yet, the tide turned due to an invisible ally, variola major, or smallpox. This biological catastrophe decimated the Aztec population, killing nearly 40% of the city in a single year, including Moctezuma's successor, Cuitlahuac. By the time the Spanish returned with Tlaxcalan allies and custom-built brigantines to lay siege, the city's defenders were starving and diseased. The fall of Tenochtitlan in August 1521 was a scorched earth conclusion. The Spanish systematically dismantled the Templo Mayor, using its sacred volcanic stones to lay the foundations of the Metropolitan Cathedral and the National Palace. The intricate chinampas were neglected as the Spanish began a centuries-long project to drain Lake Texcoco, fundamentally altering the valley's ecology. But did the empire truly vanish? Or did it simply transform into something that remains alive in the heart of modern civilization? The legacy of the Mexica. The story of the Aztec Empire is one of history's wildest roller coasters. A lightning-fast rise to power, followed by an equally sudden collapse. Their highs were truly incredible. They used pure genius to turn a buggy swamp into Tenochtitlan, a stunning Venice of the West that was cleaner and more advanced than London or Paris at the time. Their Chinampa system, the famous floating gardens, is still considered one of the smartest ways to grow food ever invented. Plus, they were way ahead of their time by educating every child and creating calendars more accurate than those in Europe. But these achievements had a dark side. The Aztecs stayed in power through a brutal tax system and a religious requirement for human sacrifice. This made their neighbors hate them. When the Spanish arrived with steel armor and deadly diseases like smallpox, the empire's internal tensions snapped. After only 200 years, their political rule was over. Yet, the Aztecs never truly disappeared. You see their legacy every time you use words like chocolate, tomato, or avocado. You see it on the Mexican flag, which features the same eagle and serpent from the 1325 prophecy. Most importantly, they proved that a group of outcasts could build a miracle out of nothing but mud and determination. They remind us that even when things look impossible, humans have the power to adapt and innovate. Their miracle in the mud still inspires us today. So, the real question is, are we brave enough to turn the swamps in our own lives into something legendary?